Okay, so that's quite an easy one for me. So there's one that has kind of stuck out in my mind for a long time now, and it is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So let me go back a little bit. I'm probably going back maybe about 25 years or so, and at that particular point I was married to my first husband and had kind of known before I get married that it maybe wasn't the best move on my part, but like a lot of people, you feel the pressure of all the arrangements and things that are made, and you go through with something. And I probably think this would be the first time that I consciously ignored my gut telling me not to do it. So during that relationship, it got physically and emotionally abusive. And I remember on one of the many occasions that I would be blamed for something, thinking that something had to change. And then one day I read this quote, and I kept thinking, well, if I don't change anything, then nothing's going to change. So I started to make a plan for leaving and for going it alone. And at this point I had a couple of kids. And I just remember thinking, I deserve better than this, and this is not the way it's supposed to be. So left my marital home and made myself homeless, and went along to the authorities to get some kind of help, and ended up in a bed and breakfast with 2 kids. But somehow that at that point that seemed a better option than staying in a marriage that was making me miserable. And that also had that marriage also had an impact on my weight. So I was starting to notice that my weight was going up and up and up. So yeah, that quote really changed my life at that point. Okay, so after leaving my first husband, I had a few years on my own, and my weight had still kept going up, and it was something that I'd battled with from about the age of 12, and I'd reached a size 22, and I was just miserable and didn't really enjoy life, and obviously I wasn't wearing clothes that people of my own age were wearing, and just felt pretty miserable. So I joined a multinational weight loss company, and something had changed in my head that I decided that I was really going to go for it. And instead of using faddy diets and making small changes and then going backwards, I decided to completely change the way that I eat and completely change the way that I lived. So therefore, because I did that, I was then successful and achieved my target weight around about 2001, 2002, and couldn't believe the difference that it made in my life. So at that point, I decided that I would pursue a job of becoming a leader. And I realised at that point that I wanted to bring something different to the role of being a leader. I was hungry to make a difference and wanted to be a different kind of leader to the leaders that I had seen. So rather than bullying people into losing weight, I wanted to support people and help them to reach their goals. So I learned that, gosh, we're all so similar. I learned that. And I learned that there was a very strong connection between the relationship that we have with food and the relationship with our mind. I didn't really know all the answers, but I just knew that the answers that I had weren't weren't where it ended. I knew there was much more to learn. But I really enjoyed, I worked for that company for 13 years, seen a lot of people experience a lot of success from a nurturing point of view rather than a bullying point of view that I'd seen maybe in the past. So I really enjoyed working with people and could almost sense in people when something wasn't quite right. And I started to tap into that. I started to maybe point out to people that I knew there was something not quite right, and I found that people would confide in me very easily. Weight's obviously a very personal issue for people, and I built a lot of trust, and therefore quite often people would tell me things that they maybe hadn't told anybody else in their whole life. So a very rewarding job as far as I was concerned. So I think that probably just started the curiosity off for me. I started to become quite fascinated with how people worked. So I decided to enroll in a course, probably going back about 5 years ago, and it was a life coaching course. And at the time, the thoughts that I had were that it would maybe help me to bring a little bit more depth to the job that I was in, and that potentially I could maybe help to solve for people this deep-rooted connection that they would have towards their mood and food and emotions and the mind. So I enrolled in the course and really enjoyed it. But what actually came out of the course was the decision that I thought it was time for me to start moving on. So unexpectedly, during the course, with the questions that I was answering on it, I found that the questions were starting to lead me to a change in career. So I did another couple of courses and kind of was trying to consider it and trying to think of a way that I could make things work, but fear kept holding me back. I was a little bit scared of the change and scared of going it alone, and worried if it wasn't successful, what would I do? And also it was going to take me back to a similar scary time when I'd left my first husband and had to financially support 2 kids and myself. So I obviously was leaving a stable job that I could have stayed in until I was retired. But there was part of me that started to think if I did that, then I wasn't being loyal to myself and I wasn't following my gut instinct that was trying to tell me that it was time to move on. So this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because when I did leave, I remember when I put my notice in, a lot of people being very shocked and telling me that they thought that I was incredibly brave. And so to me, on one side, I no longer wanted to work for a company who didn't value me, and that is the way that I'd been feeling for probably the 2 or 3 years before I did leave. But the other side of the coin was obviously, it's, you hear of a lot of people starting up their own businesses and they get into trouble, and they maybe find it a lot tougher than what they thought. But I kind of dug deep at that point and thought that I need to believe in myself at this point, and I need to know that I've got it in me to be able to go alone and not be scared of it. So yeah, I guess a little bit like facing a fear, which is something that I now ask people to do on a daily basis. So I can base that on the experience of having to face some fears myself in life. Oh, I can't even begin to tell you what I've learned. But I guess to give you the short version of that answer, I've learned a lot, but actually what I've realised is that the mind is a very simple thing. And I think we all tend to think that our minds are really complicated, when actually they're not. We've just put a lot of complicated thoughts and emotions in there, and once you weed through them, you find that your happiness is just sitting right there underneath. But I've learned really that the toughest of problems and the things that you maybe think that you've had your whole life, I maybe see people who've been suffering with things for 25, 30 years, and they think that they're stuck with it. And I've realised that actually, once you get the mind to cooperate, it will change things very, very quickly for you. Oh, change. Absolutely change. From meeting a client on that first day, and sometimes it can be a first phone call, or meeting up for a coffee just to let them get a chance to get to know you, and how timid and frightened and they're in a place where they are filled with fear, and they've had to take such a brave step even contacting me, to maybe the last session that I have with them, and they are ecstatic that they have been able to make the changes that they want. They leave me feeling much more confident, knowing who they are, knowing what direction they want to go in life, and not having any of the things that hold them back anymore. So, oh gosh, there are so many. Job satisfaction is so important to me, and when I am sitting with somebody, I am very, very present with them. I am in this journey with them. So that is the exciting part. The same as on workshops, when everybody arrives on the first morning and they're very shy and they don't maybe talk to anybody else, and then after maybe the first tea break and the first day, they're starting to relax a little bit, and then they're completely different people when they're leaving at the end of the second day. So yeah, and I'm excited because I know what's in store for them, so I get really excited to see what changes they're going to make.